Hi, everyone. Am I loud enough? No. Am I loud enough? Yeah. Crap. Damn, I don't know if I can sustain this, but I'll try for you. All right, so I'm going to be talking to you guys about React Native and my experiences with it, how to get started, and definitely when not to get started. So once upon a time, I needed a mobile app. And okay, so a friend of mine needed a mobile app, and so I figured I'd help out. And this app needed a couple of different things. Firstly, it needed to wake up like an alarm clock. So it needed to kind of, like the whole screen needed to be awake. The app needed to open up. There had to be widgets and noises and nonsense. And that isn't something that you can do from something like a web app. I needed native functionality. So on Android, there's this thing called the Android Alarm Manager, and it was just a requirement. And so, and on top of that, like I really like React. I think it's fun and powerful. So the front end was complex enough that I was like, React, Redux, and Sagas, like those will rock my world in this application. And so React Native just seemed like absolutely the best choice. So what is React Native? React Native is one of a plethora of different tool sets that you can use for cross-platform application development. So if you're making an app for some users, it's going to have a face. Where's it going to live? Maybe it's an Android app or an iOS app, or it runs on a Windows phone, or it's a web app, or it's a desktop app. Like it's a number of different things. So React Native is like, it's very good at these things at the top. It's kind of okay at those. It's pretty good at these two, but it's not as good at Linux as far as I know. But I actually just needed that. So yeah, so that's kind of where it fits into supported technologies or supported platforms. So its selling point is learn once, run anywhere. So you learn your React and all of the tools associated with it and all the tricks and cool stuff, and then you can run it on your mobile device as a native application. And that's really cool. It makes use of a native visual layer. So that means it uses native components. So your buttons on React Native, if you're running it on Android, it's a native Android button. It looks like an Android button. It feels like Android. If you run it on an Apple device, it feels like Apple. So that's quite nice, depending on your circumstances. There are pros and cons to this, of course. The pros are that it feels like the native thing. The cons are that it's not really that configurable. Like if you want your button to look like a glowing unicorn, it's going to be freaking difficult to pull that off. You probably wouldn't. Oh, I'm going to ignore that for now. Yeah, native components. It also can't do some really simple things. Like if you just wanted to show an SVG, you can't. Like it's not that easy. You need to jump through some hoops to do these simple visual things. But then you can execute JavaScript. So pretty much your JavaScript executes on the device, and your JavaScript calls the native component, the native stuff, and that's wonderful. So some people would say this must be hellishly slow. It's usually just-in-time compiled, so it's not actually that slow. Except sometimes on Apple devices, it gets weird. It was created by the Facebook. Its initial release was quite some time ago, but its first stable release was just a month ago. So it's still, it's being used by industry in a big way. Like there's a lot of big companies using it, but like a month ago, it was considered stable. So that means it's got room to grow, right? So I wanted to give you guys a balanced view of React Native in the landscape of other kind of cross-platform mobile development platforms. Because even though it seemed like the right choice for me, maybe it's not the right choice for you. Maybe you freaking hate React. It's possible. It's weird, but except if you're Mike. But it's possible. So React Native versus just native. So one trade-off you can make is like instead of doing a React Native application, you can just use plain old native code. So Android uses Swift, iOS uses Swift or Objective-C if you're old school, and on the Android side you have Kotlin or Java if you're old school. So it's cool because you can make something really fast, but your dev team is much, much slower, and you have like double the code, double the bug list, double the dev team, double the pizza. It's problematic. You want to avoid that. So it seems that industry as a whole is moving away from this unless they've got legacy applications, just from the asking around that I've done. But you could end up with something blazingly fast, which might be what you need. The next thing I want to talk about is Flutter. So Flutter is kind of also a new kid on the block, very popular, created by Google, which is nice. Like, they do some very, very cool things. Its visual layer is not native, so it draws a picture and makes that picture interactive, and Dash is a thing. So for me, it didn't make sense because I didn't have time to learn Dash and I wanted to use my tricks. So that's that one. Worth looking into if you don't know React. Then there's this other thing called Xamarin, which is a bit more old school. Microsoft made it. It's compiled into something that is very, very native. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty fast. It's .NET if you have that capability. Then there's PWAs. Who knows what a PWA is? Okay, cool. That's good. That's good. All right, so walks like an app, quacks like an app, but it's a website. So basically, you can make a website and then effectively tell the device that this website should act like an app, and then it looks like an app, and you can put a shortcut to it on your home screen, and life is good. The problem, though, is that it is in fact a website, so you can only access certain functionality. A lot of the time, it's enough. And if I could have used one of these instead of React Native, then I probably would have gone that way, because it's much nicer to work with. You couldn't, for example, use the alarm manager from a PWA. Then I heard about this other thing way too late called a TWA. It's pretty cool. So PWAs are great and all. A TWA is a PWA that's trusted, and it can be put onto, for example, the Google App Store, but the Google Play Store, but it only works on Android devices. It does allow you to access a background service, though, so it means you do have access to native functionality, which is pretty cool, but in every other way, it's just like a clever website. And then there's Ionic. So Ionic, I didn't even consider it at the beginning because I was like, ew, Angular, sorry. No, like I just didn't enjoy Angular, and I haven't used it for a long time, and I found React more fun. And I heard these bad things about web views being slow. So how Cordova worked was, not Cordova, how Ionic worked was that it had this thing called Cordova, which acted as a layer between, well, Cordova is what you use to interact with the native functionality. And then you have a web view that draws out your application. So it's kind of like a website within a native app. And it seemed kind of clunky and weird to me, so I stayed away from it. And people say Cordova's hard to work with. Like, I just haven't heard a lot of good things about it. So I was just like, no, not Ionic, anything but that. But I realize I'm very biased. I'll get to that later, the bias. So actually getting started with React Native is quite easy. Well, there's an easy way and a hard way, like in a lot of things. The easy way is with this thing called Expo, right? So how many of you have used React before? Awesome. Okay, so like create React app, and then you just run it, and it just works. That's wonderful. So you can do a similar thing with Expo. So you just install it, and then you initialize a project, and then you start it. And it takes those 4 lines of code to start your React Native project, which is wonderful. So I'm going to attempt a demo. It didn't work the last time I did it, but let's see what happens. Okay, for science. Actually, what is that? Okay. Awesome. So that's my screen of my phone. So you can see that, which is great. Now what I'm going to do is go over here, and I'm going to just start my Expo application. What did I even say before? Oh, it's just npm start, nothing fancy. Cool. Oh no. Okay, I've run out of space on my hard drive, you guys. This is terrible. And my right click doesn't work. Oh gosh. All right, so now it's starting. Life is good. It's over here. So when you start your application, it picks up on the side here, and then it finally shows you a little QR code, which is wonderful. Then you download this thing called Expo on your phone, and so I'm just opening Expo up. Looks like that. Great. Then I'm gonna click on a button. I'm gonna tell it to scan a QR code. I'm gonna scan that thing. And now, my application is beginning. And you can see there's like this little count happening at the bottom here. Takes for freaking ever. We're waiting, we're waiting. It's probably my main qualm. I don't know. It's one of my main qualms with Expo is that it just takes a really, really, really long time. While it's busy. What? Oh no, it broke in a fantastic way. That's another one of my qualms with Expo is that it kind of comes up with these really obscure error messages. It doesn't look like React anymore. I think this is a hard drive thing. Okay, demo gods have failed me. Again. But it's okay. So what I wanted to demonstrate there was mostly the slowness of Expo. So basically, like whenever you make a change to your code, it does live reload on your phone, which is really nice. But it takes like 30 seconds sometimes. You just like make this little change and then you're like, and it's not pleasant. So you end up having to install some extra stuff to make it work, and that's okay, but it's kind of a pain in the neck to do. Especially if you're used to deving with React in a specific way. So usually when you dev with React, you have like a web browser and you have the developer tools and you have like cool plugins that you've installed to make this easy. Now you don't have any of that anymore because all that happens when you start your Expo project is you get that cool page with like the QR code on it, and it doesn't give you a lot. So I found that quite frustrating. The other thing that I found quite frustrating, I found quite frustrating was the error messages. So basically, like React error messages usually make quite a lot of sense comparatively, but how Expo works, or how React Native works, is like lots of native stuff and then like a little bit of React, and then if your React breaks, like the native stuff kind of complains, and it's not always immediately clear like what you should do and where you should go for help. Sometimes it's just very, very obscure. Miss the dev tools a lot, and you need a device or an emulator, so you can't just dev without that, which can be frustrating. And then came LinuxConf. So while I was learning about React Native, I was like, I volunteered for a talk, and then I had to prepare for the talk, and this is what happened next in my life. So basically, I wanted to give a balanced opinion of React Native versus its competitors, and I was like, okay, fine. Like I know I don't like Angular, but lots of people do. Let me research this Ionic thing and get more into it, and just like let people make their own choice instead of saying like, eat my opinions, people. So then there was a twist. Ionic got like a serious remix. Like it got rewritten completely, which is cool. So now, so Ionic 4 is out. It's really, really nice, and I want to talk more about that. Twist. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about getting React to work on native as opposed to React Native now. So yeah. So basically, Ionic 4 is really cool because it's been dubbed Ionic for everyone, right? So what's cool about it is that it's not tied to Angular anymore. It used to be like super glued together. Now it's just super glued to standard like web stuff. So it works with, yes. So it's all about web components, which is great because it means that you're not tied to any one framework. And as new frameworks come out, you should be able to just use them without much of a problem. So right now it supports Angular, like of course, but it also supports React in a nice way. And it supports Vue as well, and it supports just old regular JavaScript if you hate all of those things. It'll probably support other, so that's where the documentation goes, but you can do whatever you need. And that's really, really cool. The other thing that's cool about it is if you get this thing to run, it runs in a browser as well as on your phone. And that's quite nice because it means that you have access to all the dev tools that you're used to. So you can develop as rapidly as you would with a regular React application because it just updates in the browser. So that's very nice. And then the other thing I noticed, so I made like a little Hello World React Native app, and then I made a little Hello World Ionic app, and I made some APKs from each of them. I was like, how big are they? And this is it. Like Ionic was way, way smaller. It's like 6.12 megabytes versus 47. Which is insane. So, like, with Ionic, I figured since it I was told it would be big, but it's not big. Like, one of the cons of Ionic is supposed to be that it's big, but it's like so much smaller than React Native. So, I don't know, that's pretty awesome. Especially if you're deving in South Africa. Like, people often don't have great phones and great connections. So, I think it's a better choice. Or they run out of hard drive space like a noob. Crap. So embarrassing. Don't tell anyone. Promise me. Then the other thing is, so there's this thing called, so Cordova was a thing for a long time. They've created this new thing called Capacitor, which is, it takes all the lessons of Cordova and makes something that's a lot more developer friendly. So Cordova, like, it does the job, but people don't make plugins for it so much because it's not easy to do. It's not a friendly platform. Whereas Capacitor is designed with like dev friendliness in mind from day one, which is really, really nice. And it's compatible with your Cordova stuff. So that's cool. So it should be like quite a smooth transition if you wanted to move from Cordova to Capacitor in theory. So that's nice. And it's also ridiculously easy to get started. So 3 lines of code. I might have more space now because I deleted stuff. We could try. Let's give it a shot. For science. Okay, let me do this, actually. Okay. So this is just like the stock standard application. And it seems to be out of memory, so let's not worry about it. But basically, this is what you do, and then it acts like React. So it opens up by default, and then you can go over here, and you can change some stuff, and you can say, hi there, Jozi.JS, and save that, and go back here, and it's quick. Like, it sorts itself out quickly. With Expo, you'd have to wait for freaking ages if you wanted to add 1 character of text. You'd be like, oh, I made a typo. Shit, I have to wait. So that's quite nice. Yeah. So then I was like, okay, cool. So this is awesome. Let me give a balanced view, right? And I couldn't really find a reason to use React Native instead of Ionic. As much as I searched, I tried hard. But it seems like it's a better choice because it's faster, because it's easier to get started. The sizes are smaller. It's just more approachable. So that's quite nice. Some people might disagree. I think, are there React Native people in the room? Awesome. Are there Ionic 4 people in the room? No. Are the React Native people going to try Ionic? No. What the hell? It's so much faster, you guys, and it's tiny. And so, like, React Native is learn once, run anywhere, right? Whereas this is write once, run anywhere. So once you've got your code base, it works in a browser, fine. It works on like devices as well, so it'll work on your Android and your iOS and whatever. You can use Electron and make it into a desktop app. So it works in all the places, the same code, to an extent. If you go too native with it, then not so much. But I mean, that's freaking cool. So you don't need to adapt too much. So then I was like, all right, so if I wanted to start again from scratch, what's the future of this thing? So I mean, technologies come and go, and everybody here has heard of JavaScript fatigue. Who hasn't? Who hasn't? Okay, so like this stuff changes every 5 minutes, and it's quite like tough to keep up sometimes. So you want to use something that has a future. And so, this is just Google Trends, right? So I didn't do anything too in depth to come up with my new biased opinions, but this is, I think, a good start. So this blue line at the top here is React, right? And then Vue is like slightly below React. Sometimes it actually overtakes React in searches. So that's kind of interesting. And then Angular is half that. Like consistently about half is searched as React Native. And to me, it's like, the more awesome something is, the more people will search for it most of the time. I mean, everybody has heard of React. Everybody's heard, well, not everybody, but you know, this, like these people heard of React, heard of Angular, heard of Vue, but everybody's looking up React and Vue, but not as many people Angular. So I was like, okay, cool. So these things have probably like more of a future. Angular's older. It's been around for longer, but these things like React overtook it, and it's just like staying ahead, which is cool. And then I was like, all right, how about React Native versus Ionic, right? And it looks like that. So we have Ionic up here, and we have React Native down there because it's only been stable for 5 minutes and it's not a great experience. Whereas Ionic has been stable for a long time, and it's a great experience. The problem is that it runs Angular, which isn't that popular. So I think what's going to happen is because React's popular and Ionic's popular, like it's just going to be more popular, and React Native's like going to lose ground. It already doesn't have a lot of ground. So that's just my thought. Yeah. And that's it. So let me introduce myself. I do this at the end just because of life. So my name is Sheena, and I work for Umuzi, and we are hiring techies. So basically, we teach people how to code. And so here's some resources for those of you who want to learn how to use React on Ionic 4. The slide is on the interwebs, so you can download it. And that's the end of my presentation. Yeah. So